this month is freedom from fear and error thinking. And in particular, today I'll be talking about fear, punishment, and unworthiness. I was thinking about freedom from fear and error thinking, and I thought, wow, so that will mean I'll get to a point where I'll never experience fear, I'll never experience error thinking, but I also know that that's going to take some work on my part. I'll probably go home today and have a little error thinking. I started off my day with a little error thinking when my dog woke me up at 5 o'clock. But what happens is that we get these tools, practicing the science of mind, practicing the creative process and affirmative prayer. We have these tools available to us so that if we get caught in fear and error thinking, they cannot hold us prisoner. So we don't have to stay there. So that is some really good news. Nothing can hold us prisoner. We don't have to get stuck in the error thinking. So I was trying to think of a character from mythology or history that really embodied this story of error thinking and then changing his thinking so his life would get even better. And Job came to mind, the story of Job. Now, I think most of you know the story of Job really well. He was really righteous and he praised God all the time. God was rather proud of him, and we'll talk about how Job praised him. But one day Satan says to God, well, yeah, he praises you. He has a really good life. Why wouldn't he praise you? I bet he wouldn't praise you if you took it all away from him. Well, God wanted to prove him wrong, so he told Satan, do your best. You can ruin his life, just don't kill him. And so that's basically the story of Job, is losing everything. He lost his money, he lost his family, and then he lost his health. But Job, part of the story I find really interesting is that Job had these 3 friends. And these 3 friends were talking about him behind his back. And they decided they knew all the things Job did wrong to ruin his life. So they were going to go talk to Job about this. And the first friend says, well, you've just really sinned. So you're being punished. The second friend says, you need to be more upright. You need to be more good than you already are. And the third friend says, well, you're pretty self-righteous and fearful, and you brought all this on yourself. So now Job feels betrayed by his friends, who are blaming him for all of the tragedy in his life. But Job also feels betrayed by God and starts asking the question, why me? Why did this happen? I'm a good person. Why? I demand to know why. And so this is the part I love. God comes to Job and answers his question with a series of questions, like so many questions that would take me all 30 minutes to get them to you. So I picked out my favorite questions because God wanted to give Job something to think about. So this is what God starts off saying. Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Declare it if you have understanding. Come on, declare. When did I create the morning stars? And all of the angels shouted for joy. Or who shut the sea with the gates when it broke forth as if it had issued from the womb? Have you commanded the dawn since the beginning of your days? Or do you know the place of the morning? Where's the dwelling place of light? And where's the place of darkness? Do you know its borders and the path to its house? Or in what manner is light distributed? And where does the wind come forth to go across the earth? Can you stop the movement of the Pleiades? Or have you seen the path of Orion? Do you know the laws of the heavens? Do you know the laws of the heavens? Needless to say, Job was a little embarrassed. And then he was humbled. But this being humbled allowed him to surrender. And in the surrendering, he was able to align on a deep and a true level with that works through him. He was able to align with God. He was able to allow all of that goodness to flow through him. without judgment. And his life completely turned around, right? You remember how that story ends. His life became even more abundant. Now, metaphysically, this is a story of error thinking. And Job represents that aspect of us that on the outside, we may be all like, yeah, I am really spiritual and I walk the walk and I understand the truth principles. But on the inside, there's a little fear and we buy into the appearance of things. And then we let a feeling of unworthiness overcome us. It gets the best of us. So that's Job. Jehovah, or God, represents our divine nature. Now, in this story, I actually thought that God was kind of mean to Job to let this all happen. But when we see the metaphysical representation that God is source, God is the part of us, God is the universe, is all things, trusting in us and already seeing our perfection and honoring the choices that we make, even when the choices we make don't honor ourselves. That source, that God, honors us as perfection already. And then Satan represents a mental tendency. And that mental tendency is that habitual, limited thinking that we can fall into, believing we're separate from source, that we were dropped off on this planet, we are on our own, our life is filled with lack and limitation. If we want to change our circumstances, we have to manipulate things outside of us because we do not have awareness of the power that works through us, for us, as us. With that limitation thinking, we're going to think there's something out here giving to us, but if it doesn't give to us, then we blame it. If something goes wrong in our lives, we blame it. We blame it. So, Satan consciousness is what puts the blame outside of us and keeps us disempowered. Now, I think most of us face these different mental tendencies of the appearance of disconnection, the appearance of separation. And that may take different forms. It may feel like suffering. It may feel like punishment. It may feel like unworthiness, fear, blaming other people. Now, the things that Job's friends accused him of, you did something really bad, so you have to get punished, or you need to be even more good than you already are, or you're so fearful you brought this on yourself. I think these are things we hear people talk about in the spiritual community. This may be things that we experience. And so I want to talk about these three things and then how we shift our consciousness to get out of it. So the first thing Job was accused of, you are being punished. You must have done something pretty bad. It can be easy to feel punished. We can have a bad day. Like not too long ago, I had a really bad day. And I was outside cleaning up after the dogs. We have 3 dogs, and they have to use the yard a lot. So I'm out there with a shovel, and I end up chasing it around the yard. It's like just keeps moving and rolling, and I'm like carrying the shovel, and finally I'm like, why does the universe hate me? I mean, it was really feeling put out because this wasn't an easy task for me. If we're asking, why does this have to happen to me? That's a form of believing that we're being punished for something. Now, other times it's heavier stuff than just having a bad day. Someone may get a scary medical diagnosis and then ask the question, well, why does this have to happen? I thought I was taking good care of myself, and I'm a good person, I'm nice to people, and I don't understand why this is happening. Somebody's spouse might leave them. And they may ask that question, why me? Why did they leave me? I thought things were good. Why did they fall in love with somebody else? So we're asking the why me questions. So there are all kinds of ways that we can buy into this idea that we're getting punished. Sometimes it might look like something just doesn't work out for us. I've known people who have poured their heart and soul into a project or a business and maybe even had this business for 10 years. And then, even though they felt like they were divinely guided, like they were living their purpose, the business crumbles out from underneath them. And they ask that question, why? Why did this happen? I thought I was being divinely guided. I felt so supported. And my intuition was always telling me the right thing to do. And I was always trusting my intuition. I was always praying about this. Why did this have to happen? So punishment can also feel like a form of, why me? Why me? But see, when we are stuck, when we get stuck in that thinking, why me? What happens is that we're focusing on the problem and we're pouring more energy into that and we're making it even more powerful. That's actually a mental tendency, and we'll start pouring energy into the problem unconsciously. We'll be adding all that energy to it without thinking about it. Ernest Holmes says something really beautiful about this, though. The universe holds nothing against us. It can hold nothing against us because it can know nothing unlike itself. Therefore, it only knows us as perfection. The universe only knows you as perfection. The universe only knows us as perfection. So it's not going to punish us. It wouldn't punish us because it's not judging us. It's giving us all the substance we need to create whatever it is we're putting within our mind, but it's not judging what we do with it. We punish our own selves by judging how the situation turns out, which leads into the next of Job's big failures. You are not good enough. That's what his friend said. Maybe you need to be more good. That's what his friend said. So this is about unworthiness, and unworthiness can actually be really sneaky. Like, somebody may not even feel like they have issues with unworthiness, but then unconsciously, they're making decisions based on feeling unworthy. Like, for example, say that somebody works for a big corporation, and maybe they've been there for 5 years and they're ready to grow, and they see another job opening in a different department, and they think, wow, that sounds kind of like an adventure. That could be really fun. Maybe I'll apply for that. But then their next level of thinking goes into, well, there are a lot of people here who are probably going to apply for that, and they're probably way more qualified than me. Well, what if I applied for that? And what if they actually interviewed me? And then they were like laughing at me in the interview and saying, man, why did you apply for this job? You do not belong here. But then what if they didn't do that? What if they actually hired me? And then I got into this job, and the job hated me, and I couldn't do anything in this job. Well, what happens if I don't even make it through my probationary period, but they've already filled my other position, and I lose my job? If I apply for this job, I may lose a job where I have security. So maybe it's not a good idea for me to do that. That is how unworthiness sneaks into our decisions. It sounds perfectly reasonable. Sounds perfectly reasonable. Unworthiness is also a mental tendency, that we do it without thinking about it, and it often is working its way through our decisions without us even knowing. Ernest Holmes said something real interesting about unworthiness. He says, fear, discouragement, the feeling of unworthiness, and inferiority, as well as a sense of uncertainty about one's relationship to God, probably start with an unconscious sense of rejection. These thought patterns are more or less laid down in every person's life. Every person's life. He says, your business is not to bother about where they came from, but to know how to get rid of them. This is really important. We don't want to focus on where they came from. I have known people who go to therapy, and then after their therapy appointment, they have to spend 2 or 3 days recovering from all the pain and trauma they relived. And I know people who've gone to therapy. I've seen a life coach that I loved. And I walked out of there, like, excited, like handfuls of solutions and new things to do. I felt like my feet hit the ground running. Because if we're focusing on what's problematic, we're pouring more energy into that and increasing the experience of it, even though the experience we're talking about may have happened a long, long time ago. We'll relive it by pouring all that energy into it. Now, feeling unworthy is really about the uncertainty of our relationship to God, our relationship to Source. And so I'm going to talk about the remedy for that so that we can deal with the mental tendencies of punishment and fear and feeling unworthy. And And that is simply, this is like so simple. It's to acknowledge that source is everywhere present, that it's all things that we see, it's everything in the unseen, it's everything that has been, it's everything that is yet to be. It's every idea that we've ever had and acted on, it's every idea we've ever had that we've just let go. It's all things, which means we are each an emanation of source energy too. We are each that. Now, when we remember this, we start focusing on solutions instead of problems. We start focusing on the greater us instead of the little us. But we have to commit to it. You know, at first, when I first started doing that, it felt really weird, and I was a little embarrassed. I was a little embarrassed to say that out loud. But I'm not now, and you can probably tell. It feels really good. We have to commit to it, but you know, we commit to a lot of things all the time. Some things are hard, some things are easy. I mean, if you want to read a book, you have to commit to reading that book. If you want to take good care of your body, you commit to the chiropractic and the massage. You commit to good hygiene. There are a lot of things we have to commit to. So this is our remedy to transcend the error thinking. Just simply reminding ourselves that we are source energy walking around in a body. We are the emanation of source that can only see itself as perfect, and it only sees us as itself. To the third thing now that Job was accused of, you were thinking negative thoughts and you brought this on yourself. Okay, this is kind of the law of attraction, right? Job was accused of all the bad things that happened to him. It was all his fault. The spiritual community, I've noticed in the last 20 years, has turned the law of attraction into a punishment and reward system. So, for example, if I receive a check for $1,000 out of the blue, it means I must be thinking positively. However, if I get a flat tire, well, it must mean I was thinking negatively. But I'll tell you, I received a check one time for $1,000, and I was in a foul mood for like a month when I received that check. I mean, I was a just horrible person to be around. And when I got that flat tire, I didn't notice it until the morning. It was back when my kids were still in school, and I had to drive them. I got up and saw that flat tire, and I'm like, guess what, kids? We're stuck at home today. And we just enjoyed being home that day. I had a great day with my kids. So not everything bad that happens to us is our fault. Even Ernest Holmes conceded in A New Design for Living that not every moment of our lives will be filled with complete happiness, with everything the heart can desire. Sometimes life is hard. Sometimes we endure things. We cannot control the weather. We cannot control natural disasters. We cannot control other people. However, we can control our response to the weather, to the natural disasters, and to how other people behave. But how are we responding in those situations? Are we rising above it? Or are we reacting through the filter of one of our mental tendencies and feeling sorry for ourselves? The choice is ours. It says in the Bible that it rains on the just and the unjust, and the sun shines on the good and the evil. What this means is that in a difficult situation that's not our fault, it's still up to us if we're going to choose from victimhood or if we're going to rise above it and move into a solution. The choice is always ours. Always ours. Ernest Holmes says, the only way to become the kind of person that we want to be, to live the kind of life we want to live, is first to be that person in our thoughts, live that life in our mind with unwavering conviction. We have to have that unwavering conviction, which means that we can do it in spite of the appearance that it's not presently in our physical reality. We still feel the truth of it. We still know that it's in divine mind being created. And the more energy we pour into it, the greater physical anchor we become to bring it through us. But if we're stuck in our mental tendency of unworthiness and fear and punishment, we take the energy from the thing we want, from the life we live, and instead we pour it into our mental tendencies. Now there's a law at work in our lives also called the law of cause and effect. This means every choice that we make has an outcome. It's not the universe that's rewarding us or punishing us. If we make a choice that fails to honor our divine nature, we suffer the results from that. If we make a choice that honors our divine nature, we reap the benefits. With every choice, there is a consequence. But we're not always consciously choosing how we act in the world. Our choices aren't always conscious. They can come through that mental filter of fear, of being punished, right? Of being unworthy. So, for example, back to the person who wants to apply for that job. If they feel unworthy, but they don't make a change and they choose from their mental tendency, they won't apply for the job, and then that will be their experience in more unworthiness later. They'll regret that they didn't apply for the job. They'll feel bad about it. They'll feel like, oh man, if I was just a better person, if I was just smarter, they will have that result. That will be the consequence. But if that same person, filled with unworthiness, worried about applying for that job, afraid of what could happen, if they decide to rise above that because they remind themselves, there's something in me that knows what to do, how to do it, and it compels me to act on what it knows. So even though I'm terrified, and even though I may fail, and even though people interviewing me may laugh at me, I'm going to apply for that job anyway. And they apply for the job. Now, whether or not they get the job or not doesn't matter. They have made a different choice that honored who they are as a divine being. So now what happens is this changes the consequences in their life. It changes the effects. Now, whether or not they get that job, they now have new opportunities that present themselves to them. So we align ourselves with Source. We align ourselves with Source. We remind ourselves we are Source energy. We're an emanation of Source energy. In all of its infinite expressions, we are one of those expressions. Each of us. Each of us. It's all up to us. It is all up to us. We have that divine nature flowing through us, for us, as us all the time. We act on it. It doesn't come in and swoop in and rescue us. It does not clean up our mess. But when we align with it, we realize the truth of ourselves. And then we can make choices. And we clean up our own mess. We can make choices and we rescue ourselves. Okay, Job made a new choice. He surrendered to his divine nature. And then you know what he did after that? He forgave his friends. And then he forgave himself. And then his life was changed. So I'm going to close with a verse on love, love, love from the book of 1 John. My beloved, let us love one another, for love is from God. And everyone who loves is born of God and knows God. He who does not love does not know God, for God is love. If we love one another, love is perfected within us. We abide in love and love in us, for we are made from love. That is a lot of love. Now when he's saying when we don't know God, we don't know love. When we don't know God, we don't know our own divinity. We don't know who we are. If we're not loving Source, if we're not coming from that place of love, we don't know who we are. But there is that within us that does not recognize punishment or fear or unworthiness. There is that within us that only knows us as pure perfection. There's that within you that only knows you as pure perfection. And so it is.